Hello everyone, welcome back to Patristic Nectar Kids. I'm Kriya Destiny of Ascetic Life of Motherhood. We are going to talk a little bit about Saint Anthony. He was a monastic in the early times of the church, and there's so many interesting things we learn about monasticism and the struggles that we have against sin and temptations from Saint Anthony. Usually what we do is we talk a little bit about this, and I will show you an activity that you can do together in your homes with your families or with your church friends. Maybe this will become a new tradition in your household. So I hope you'll stay tuned. Today we're going to be making monastery soup, which is perfect for the feast of St. Anthony since he was a monastic, and this is something that you might find at a monastery, something that monks might cook because there's no meat and there's no dairy on it. So it's a fasting day is when his feast is. So I thought it to be fitting to make monastery soup on the feast of St. Anthony. So come along and let's get to cooking. It takes about an hour, but it's not a lot of intensive work. Now, the life of St. Anthony was actually written down and recorded by another saint, St. Athanasius, who, when you read his story, will tell you, I was there. I washed his hands. I witnessed these things. And the reason why I wrote them down is so that you can know that they were true. So we have the complete works of St. Anthony all written down. He lived about 200 years after Jesus died, and he's considered the father of monasticism. Now, a monastic, like a nun or a monk, this is somebody who has devoted their entire life to prayer and the service of Christ. Okay, this is a very unique vocation. And so, not that he wasn't the first to do this. We have St. John the Baptist. St. Anthony is unique in that people started to be drawn to him. They would go seek him out in the desert. They wanted to learn more. And so soon enough, he had such a big following that monasteries were created. Now, a monastery is a place where men all live together. They're all monks, and they have a common goal that they pray ceaselessly, and they do services, and they work as a community. Okay, before now, that didn't exist. And so St. Anthony is considered the father of monasticism. Now, for women, you would be a nun, and they have monasteries for nuns, and they all live together as women, and they have an abbess, and they do the same thing. They devote their whole life to prayer and serving Christ. It's a very, very special vocation. And if you ever get a chance to visit a monastery, I would highly recommend you go. It's a beautiful, peaceful place that's typically not in the middle of a city. You would have to seek it out in the desert or in the wilderness somewhere. It's a little farther to get to because they are secluded and retreating from the worries of the world because all they do is pray. It's a really beautiful place to go. So back to St. Anthony, okay? So St. Anthony, he lived about 200 years after Christ died, and his parents were very wealthy. They had a lot of money, but they raised him as a Christian, and St. Anthony was a very unique child. He loved God with all of his heart and with all of his soul and with all of his strength, even in his youth, because he just wanted to spend that time with the Lord, devoted to reading the scriptures and the lives of the saints. And so his parents died, and they left him an inheritance. That's a large sum of money to manage. And he took this very seriously. Well, one day he was in church because he always went to church, just like you and I. And he went to church, and that day when the deacon or the priest came out with the gospel to read the gospel from the gospel of Matthew, he heard this story. It was Jesus talking to a rich man saying, okay, you've done everything. You've followed the law. You've obeyed the commandments. Now, if you want to be perfect like your Father in heaven is perfect, go and sell everything you have and follow me. Now, when St. Anthony heard this, he actually felt like Jesus was telling him that. That story was for me. And so he did exactly that. He sold everything. He got rid of his house. He gave it away. He took all of his possessions. He sold them. He took the money and he gave it to the poor. And so he devoted his life entirely to Christ and to prayer. And so we learn from the life of St. Anthony all of the ways that the devil tried to tempt him. Interesting is, no matter what he tried, nothing could stop him. St. Anthony was never deterred to follow Christ. It didn't matter what they said. You know, one time he was in the desert and he was walking in the desert praying. He came across this big pile of money, okay, in the middle of the desert. And a thought occurred to him. I could use that money and give it to the poor, right? Money itself isn't bad, is it? Well, the question that he asked himself was this money put here as a temptation to take my focus away from Christ, or was it put here for my good, for my salvation? What do you think he did? How do you think he answered that question? Well, I'll tell you what he did. He stood up and he stepped right over that money like it was fire, and he kept on walking, and he determined that that money was put there not to bring him closer to Christ, but in fact to take him farther away from Christ. It's a really interesting temptation, because sometimes we have to make a decision about something and it's not very obvious. Is this put here for my salvation, for my good, or is this this here to keep me away from Christ? We're going to have to make a lot of decisions like that in our lifetime. So it's good to think of St. Anthony. And when you have temptations, things that are very difficult, where maybe you have friends that are trying to, pull you into something that's not good, in your heart isn't good to do, ask St. Anthony to pray for you. Help me, St. Anthony. Help me fight this temptation. Be bold and courageous and follow Christ. And sometimes that's uncomfortable. Sometimes that has a cost. But in the end, we know that following Christ is the best thing. And that even if that means we're facing temptations, that we should always keep our focus on Christ. So I love that about St. Anthony. We now have all of our dinner ready. We have some bread. We've got some soup to go along with it. We're gonna have a great dinner tonight. And as we have dinner, I'm gonna light some candles. Maybe you could do the same. And we're gonna talk about St. Anthony and his life. And we're gonna learn a little bit more. If you go to Patristic Nectar, you'll find that there's a place on their website called the Synaxarion. So if you create an account, you'll be able to listen to all the lives of the saints every single day of the year. They're all recorded. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to pull up the Patristic Nectar app and we're going to listen to the life of St. Anthony. It's 25 minutes long, but I promise you it's worth your time. You can all listen to it together. And during your dinner, talk about St. Anthony and the temptations that he faced and what we can learn, the strength that we can gain from him. Now, Mom and Dad, if you're interested in learning more about St. Anthony, I would highly, highly recommend The Life of St. Anthony by St. Athanasius. You can find this in print wherever books are sold. It's also on Audible. I encourage you, when you learn about the life of a saint, if there's something in you that's curious, that you want to learn more, explore that. Learn more about the lives of the saints. We really do learn what it means to be a Christian by seeing the examples of those who have gone before us. And I felt so inspired listening to the life of St. Anthony, and I can't wait to learn more. So I hope that you have a wonderful feast of St. Anthony. Enjoy your dinner together, that yummy, nourishing soup. And I pray whatever you do, it's a blessing to you and your family. Don't forget, subscribe to Patristic Nectar Kids so you can see more videos on how we celebrate the feast together as a family.